Well, it's that time of year, things are warming up for the summer. So today I want to talk about some tips for your lawns during that summer heat, and also some tips on some irrigation and some things to look at just in case you haven't been checking your irrigation system, or if you want to know some more about sprinklers, sprinkler types, and that type of thing. So let's get into it. First thing that's important to remember always is cool season versus warm season. So we've talked about this many times, but for those of you who are brand new, just quickly, a cool season lawn is one that does best in the spring and fall during those cooler temperatures. Warm season lawns are built for the summertime heat. They love the heat. You still have to keep some irrigation on them in most cases, just because a lot of your areas down south you get pretty extreme heat that is still going to dry things out. But as far as cool season versus warm season grasses, those things are very important to understand, and today we're going to be talking a lot about cool season grasses, which I obviously have here in central Iowa, and we'll be going over some of the things in the summertime heat here compared to down south when this is your best time to do your fertilizing. Take care of your yard during that summer heat because it actually likes that. The first important thing with cool season lawns to remember is that summer is the time when this is going to be pretty stressful for the grass. If you start to see your grass going brown or kind of getting crispy when it's not raining, this is actually a mechanism built into cool season lawns to help it protect against that summer heat. So a lot of people who are new to lawn care, especially during the summertime here in the Midwest or somewhere like that, if you're not getting rainfall, they notice their lawn going brown, or sometimes it just goes completely brown. People get confused and think, man, my lawn just completely died during the summer. What am I going to do about it? But that's called dormancy. It's something that's built into those grass types to protect themselves during the summer heat. Since they don't really like that, they would like to be in the springtime and fall time cooler temperatures. So first thing to remember is you don't necessarily have to water your lawn with a cool season lawn. I had a neighborhood back when I lived there full of yards that had never ever been watered, not a single time. And these always got real crispy and brown during the summertime, just maybe sometimes worse than others depending on drought, but they would always come back to varying degrees. They don't always look great in the spring and the fall just because of how bad that summertime heat may have been. So don't think that if your yard is going brown you necessarily have to water it. But another thing to mention with that is, I know it's been so dry across the country in many different places, even if you do let your grass go dormant, it would be best case scenario maybe every 2 to 3 weeks to give it a small amount of water. It doesn't need a whole lot, but it does need the crowns of the plant to stay alive. So maybe 1/4 of an inch every 3 weeks or something on there would keep everything alive. But just because your yard's going brown doesn't mean you have to water it. It's really up to you if you want to let it go into that dormancy period. I've done this many times at my old property too, where I just let the backyard do what it was going to do and let it come back in the fall. And by the time you get some fertilizer on it, if the rains return in the fall too, you're going to see a big bounce back and a big improvement by the end of the season. In terms of care for those cool season lawns during the summertime, you shouldn't really need to be doing a whole lot to them. Definitely be watching for any major fungus outbreaks or something if you are doing irrigation, which we'll talk about proper irrigation here in a second. But other than that, if you're sort of letting it be as it is, this is kind of a period where you don't want to be doing a whole lot to it. You don't want to be adding a ton of fertilizer. If you are getting some good rains though, and you feel like it's at least continuing to grow somewhat, this is a time when I would switch to some liquids or soluble fertilizers and just do small doses in the summertime. Nothing that's going to cause any excessive growth. It's also a good time if you need a bit of extra color to use those iron type products here. And other than that, pretty much you don't want to be doing a ton to your cool season lawn during the summertime. So let's say you do want to get some irrigation on the lawn. You want to try to keep it as green as possible during the summertime. First thing that you need to know is you need to understand some more about your soil types. Soil types are going to be important in terms of how much water you can really put down and it is going to stay there in the soil. This is where if you have a heavier soil type that's actually taking in the water, you can get away with a heavier dose of water and let it go days in between, and it should hold on to that moisture pretty well, especially outside if you're getting some humidity with it and holding those temperatures. If you live in a very dry climate where you're losing a whole lot of that moisture out of the ground every day, then you are going to have to water more in order to keep it going. But if you have a sandier or siltier soil, then a whole bunch of water on there is probably not going to be the best case scenario because it runs through that sandy soil more quickly, and this is where more frequent waterings of lighter doses is actually better in your case. So if you don't know what your soil type is, it would be a good idea go out maybe into your yard and dig up a little spot of soil with a soil probe or even just a spade or something. Take a look at some of the properties. I did have a video on this a long time ago too about doing a jar test where you can actually put your soil in a jar with water and let it settle and you'll get to see some of the properties of that. Now the second thing is, if you do happen to have an irrigation system, a lot of people get these set up and they don't really test how much water is going out. They just set it for a certain amount of time. I'm going to run it for 15 minutes, but they don't really know what does that mean, how much water is coming out, because depending on spacing, depending on the type of heads that are used, nozzles that are used, this isn't always going to be the exact same amount of water, and I'm going to demonstrate that today right now. So I got these rotors turned on here in this larger ryegrass plot. Now this is really just for demonstration purposes, not really the greatest time of day to be trying to water your lawn right now. It's windy, it's the middle of the day, and so a lot of the water that you would be putting down is pretty much evaporating. So this is just for demonstration, but I want to show you these rotors are running. So if I just set this like I set some of the other plots that I'm going to show you in a second that are much smaller and have a lot more heads going into a smaller area, I'm actually not getting the same amount of water being put down here. Depending on which gallons per minute nozzle that you have actually in these rotors, the amount of water that's being put out there and how quickly it goes down is going to change. And so I've tested this. I can run this for about 30 minutes and I'll be at about 0.3 inches of water for the most part. That's just kind of how irrigation works, where you're trying to get it as even as possible over this whole area, but some will get a little more than others. Now that I know that, I have to adjust my watering accordingly, just depending on how much I want to put down. Is there a way to actually figure out what we're putting down in certain areas here? Yes. These little things right here have come in very handy for me. I think you can get these in like a 10 pack for pretty cheap. So if you grab some of these, you just stick these down in the ground, and then at various places you can see how your irrigation is putting out water. Is it putting out water evenly? Are you missing some spots or getting some spots that are lighter than others? And we try to average this across the whole area to get a good even coverage across everything. Sometimes it means maybe a head is missing a spot and you need some adjustment on something. So this is a good way to also tell how much water is going out. So I've used these over on that same plot that I just showed you, and that's really how I came up with an average of how much water was coming out in various places. Now if we go to a smaller plot, I'm going to show you how much the difference can be. So it's a little easier on these plots just because of the size, but if I would just probably average this out and put one here and put one here. Like I said, if you happen to have more of them, you can space them at different places if you get that 10 pack. Right now, just for 2, it's about what I would do, and then I'll turn this on and show you how much more quickly water is going down into this section because of the heads and just because of how small of a space we have here. So here's why it's so important to do this, because I just had this running for 5 minutes in this zone, and obviously it's a much smaller zone. It's not likely that you're going to have a lot of super small zones like this, but maybe you have a strip next to your road or something that has quite a bit of coverage from both sides going onto it, and you're just setting it like the rest of your yard thinking that it's going to be the exact same output. Well, this in 5 minutes got me just at 0.3 inches put down onto this plot. So if I were to let it run 30 minutes like I did on that other side, thinking that it was exactly the same, then I would have drastically different amounts of water going down on those 2 different areas. Now you can also see, probably because of the wind and blowing some of it more into that other cup that was closer to this section because the wind is coming this direction, you can see that this cup was closest on that side. Doesn't have quite as much in there. It's at about 0.2, just over 0.2. So if you could do this over a larger area with more cups, you're going to get a more accurate reading. Just a couple paces, maybe 2-3 paces in between the cups. Put them out in a whole area or in a zone and see what you end up with. This is going to help you a lot to figure out how much water is actually going down, to save water, and to make sure you're using only what you need. This gives you a good opportunity when you're putting out those little irrigation test cups to check on your irrigation heads. You're visibly going to be able to see what's going on, and a lot of times since we run these 4 or 5 a.m. or something like that, you might not be seeing what's going on. You might not be noticing that certain things aren't working properly. So this is a good time to check on all those irrigation heads and make sure things are adjusted and working as they are supposed to. If you don't have an irrigation system, don't fret. I actually didn't have an irrigation system at my other house for a very, very long time, and I was doing a whole lot of stuff there without having that irrigation system. So one of the things I was able to do is use a DIY system above the ground, and so it took some irrigation heads that would normally be put in the ground, put them on some spikes, hook them together with some hoses, and then you're able to adjust very similar to as if those heads were buried into the ground. But the nice thing about it is that you can still remove it. You can change it to different areas if you have an area that you want to renovate or whatever the case is. It's not a permanent solution to where you would have to dig anything up to change it. So I'm still actually using this up by our building here on the back side, so on the north side of our building. I don't have irrigation back there, something maybe I will add in the future, but I had plenty of other zones going in this year to not worry about that right now. I do still have that system up there and I'm using that. If you'd like to know how to build that, learn more about it, I'll link that video in the description and right here in the video too, so that you can check that out. The other option that I enjoy are impact sprinklers, and I'm going to show you my favorite ones and show you kind of how I use those from time to time too. As you can see here, these impact sprinklers that I've had for many years now, I don't know exactly even how long, maybe even back to the first renovation that was done at our old house. I can't really remember, but you can see they've gotten a lot of use. I don't know if they make these anymore with the metal bases like this. I do know that they have a very similar design that I think has more of a plastic base on it now. That's not really important compared to this right here, which is doing the work for you. These are really easy to adjust with just these little metal pieces here. Tells it where to stop. And they put out a really good amount of water. So I'm going to show you this specific square back here, which is my tall fescue plot. And if you had a backyard like this, that's just a square area like this, that's a really good place for something if you just want a single sprinkler. Or I'll show you today too, I like to hook these together with a hose. And if you have enough pressure and you can hook two of them together, you get a little more water output and you get some better even coverage out of that too. And speaking of hoses, I've used so many different hoses over the years. This is a hose that I was sent this spring to test out, and I've been using it all from early spring up until now in various uses up on our porch, down here for sprinkling, watering flowers, or cleaning off the UTV, various different uses with it. And so far it's been performing really well for me, and I haven't had those frustrations that I normally have with certain other hoses. So I've really enjoyed this thing, and specifically because it's a lot lighter weight than a lot of other hoses that you're using, but still has the durability that you're used to with those other heavier hoses. And so this is actually only a 1/2 inch diameter, but what happens with it is that once it gets the water pressure in there, it actually expands out to 5/8, which is typical. Most people are probably using a 5/8. So it makes it so that it's a little smaller footprint, and actually it's just a lot lighter weight to use than those other heavier hoses. The other thing is you've got these ends on both sides so that you don't get any kinks up wherever you have it connected, if you have it connected to your house. So it also has a lifetime warranty on it. In this day and age, not a lot of things really are going to have a lifetime warranty. So they've obviously done their testing on this and know that the durability is going to be there for the long term. Using this as an example here to show you what happens if you're pulling on something around it. Usually a lot of these cheaper hoses you'll get some kinking, but I'm not getting anything happening here. So despite it being a lighter weight hose, it really does a good job of resisting the kinking. That's something that's important to me, just because I'm pulling hoses around it and there's nothing more frustrating than getting it stuck on something and all kinked up. So also on here you can see how much the pressure expands it out to that full size. If you have enough water pressure, you can use these and get some really good even coverage and get some quicker water down too. So So as I said, you can run these by themselves. It just takes a little longer for your water coverage. But if you happen to have a lot of water pressure like I do, you can cover quite a bit of area, and you're sort of running them head to head, meaning if you can get this one to spray all the way over to that one, then you're getting good even coverage across this middle part, which is pretty much what I'm able to do with my well all the way over to the other one. And then you can flip them if you want to. So you can go just move these right over there and start them spraying back this direction for good even coverage on everything. The same thing applies here. You can take these little cups and put them out into that area and see how much water is being put down, because it's probably not going to be as fast as you think it is. So a lot of people come out here and they turn on these sprinklers for 15 minutes and then they say, Man, it doesn't seem like it did anything. Well, using those cups out there to measure what you're actually doing is just as important as if you have an irrigation system or if you don't. So putting them out there to figure out what you're putting out as far as water goes is going to be a key to understanding what's actually going on to the ground. The other tip for today about irrigation and summertime temperatures is humidity. Watch that very closely. We talked about this really extensively in my last podcast. If you haven't listened to any of my podcasts, definitely check those out if you want some more in-depth information. My co-host and I go into a lot of these topics, but much more in-depth than I can do here on YouTube, so check that out. So if you live in a western climate, unfortunately a lot of times it's so dry out there, you're not getting rainfall, and you're also losing quite a bit of water each day out of the soil just because of evaporation, that you're probably going to need to be doing some more watering to keep things going. Now here in the Midwest, or also into areas that get much more humid during the summertime, the good thing about that is that we can actually keep more of that moisture in the ground. It's not evaporating as quickly, and so just because it gets to 90 degrees outside, you need to pay attention to your dew point, which is a good indication. You get 60, 70 for a dew point is going to feel very, very tropical outside, and that's going to mean there's a lot more moisture staying into the ground too. You get down to the dew points of 40 or below there, then you're losing quite a bit of moisture, and that's a very, very dry day. So it's important that you don't just look at those high temperatures each day and think that it's 90 degrees, I must be watering because it's so hot out. If it's more humid, you may not need to use as much water as you think, and you may not be losing as much water as you think. So check out the podcast for more info on those things. Also check out that Synergy hose if you're looking for a good garden hose this season. Hope those tips on irrigation and summertime lawn care helped you today. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.